All right. Hello, guys. So we are back and ready to take on where we left from in the last class, right? And just to give you a peek of what we have done in the last class, if you see the whiteboard, right? We were talking about, before talking about eigenvalues and eigenvectors, we were actually trying to figure out the origin and some interpretation of where eigenvalues come from, right? And so one of the essential things that we conjectured was that there is this invariant subspace under a linear transformation of some vector space of finite dimension, right? And these invariant subspaces actually, could give rise to eigenvalues and eigenvectors. Okay, all right. So I'll just briefly summarize the last quarter of the class from the last lecture, right? Okay, and that is this, that if we summarize from last class, is this. That we have sort of a, you know, transformation, right? Where T is linear, okay? V is finite dimensional, and there is U, which is an invariant subspace of V. And so then if all of this is true, then I would have something like this. Okay, all right. Okay, and so and of course when we talk about, and there is this vector U in vector space U, which is non-zero vector, of course. And so because we just want to talk about non-trivial, vectors. Okay, so what this shows is that this particular thing, what this shows is this, that T has a one-dimensional invariant subspace. Okay, invariant subspace if and only if T has an eigenvalue. Okay, this is really important. Now, if I go back to this particular equation, right? I know that this is equivalent to T minus lambda I U equal to 0, right? Okay, and so therefore lambda is an eigenvalue, right? Lambda is an eigenvalue. What else? So lambda is an eigenvalue of T if and only if what? T minus lambda I is not injective, right? You have shown this, earlier, right? Okay, and then there's a result which says that if also we know plus, we know that lambda is an eigenvalue of T, lambda is an eigenvalue of T, and if and only if T minus lambda I is not invertible, right? Is not invertible, right? And this happens is that because A linear map is invertible if there is an if and only if condition that we proved earlier, that it cannot be injective and surjective. So there's a necessary and sufficient condition for a linear map to be invertible is that it has to be both injective and surjective. So this means that T minus lambda I is also not surjective. Is not surjective. These are all previous results. Okay. All right. So these are all previous. Okay. Now, so what we want to conjecture is the following, that suppose T is an operator, because you know that this is an operator, right? We defined this in the last class itself. A set of linear transformation from a vector space onto itself is an operator, right? And lambda is an eigenvalue, right? Okay. Then a vector u in V, right, is an eigenvector, of T, is an eigenvector of T, which is corresponding to lambda, of course, right? Eigenvector of T if Tu equal to lambda, right? Now, this is, we know that this is equivalent to T minus lambda I u equal to 0, and therefore what we can say is that, you know, a set of eigenvectors corresponding to lambda under T, so a set of eigenvectors corresponding to lambda under T, right, is just this, right, null of T minus lambda u, right? So what can we say about this? Now we know that this is a subspace, right? So what can we say about this? What can we say about null of T minus lambda I? We know that this is a subspace of V, right? Okay. So we can in general say that this is equivalent to saying that the set of eigenvectors of T, so that means the eigenvectors of T corresponding to lambda, I mean just implied corresponding to lambda, is a subspace of. Okay. And in general, since we are also talking about direct sum, then what will happen is I should be able to write V as bunch of such assuming that V is an n-dimensional vector space, and each one of these guys is just one dimensional. Okay, all right, and they are invariant subspaces of V such that their direct sum will equal to V. Okay, all right. So this is the big picture. And so you look at each one of these subspaces and figure out what is your eigenvalue and the corresponding eigenvector, and that's it. And you take a concatenation of those eigenvectors, you will get the entire basis of eigenvectors corresponding to the vector space V. This is far easier than looking at the entire vector space and trying to find out what your basis of eigenvectors is going to be. Okay, all right. So let me save this. And then what we are going to do is we are going to, you know, see a couple of examples. Right. 15. Okay. So now let's see a few examples, right? At least a couple of examples. Okay. So let's say, uh, slightly, something that, sort of, ignites our imagination. So let's consider something like this, okay, which is a two-dimensional vector space over real or complex numbers, right? Okay. And I define this in the following manner that my transformation looks like this, right? Now, there are two possibilities. Like there are two possibilities. One possibility is that F is just the set of real numbers, or the other possibility is F is the set of complex numbers. Okay, now the thing is, I mean, when you look at this, what do you, I mean, is this sort of linear transformation familiar to you? I mean, have you seen this kind of a linear transformation before? And if you have seen this kind of a linear transformation before, I mean, how do you interpret this? What is T? What does T represent? Guys, what does T represent? No one? You can speak. No idea what does this represent? Just think a little.
Rotation, sir.
Which direction? Is it clockwise or counterclockwise?
90-degree counterclockwise.
All right, very good. Okay, so this is 90-degree counterclockwise. Now, in order to, what I want to do is to find the eigenvalues and eigenvectors of this, right? Over the set of real numbers or set of complex numbers, I don't know, right? And, you know, an operator which has an eigenvalue and an eigenvector, right? It's just, it has to satisfy um, this, right? It has to, because that's what we have seen, because it has to be a scalar multiple of that vector, right? In order to, for it to become an invariant subspace and so on and so forth, right? So that means that I have these two guys equal to each other, okay? Now, when you are writing something like this, what are you actually interpreting? What are you actually interpreting when you are writing something? Because this is just a scalar multiple of your vector, right? Correct? So this is just a scalar multiple of the vector. Now, obviously, when you are considering the set of real numbers, does this make sense geometrically? Does this equivalence geometrically make sense over the set of real numbers only? Because this, according to the eigenvalue eigenvector conjecture, eigenvalue eigenvector equivalence from the null space of T, it implies that this is nothing but a scalar multiple of a vector. But you also know the way this linear transformation is defined, this is a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation, right? So can these two ever be equal? This is my question. No, right? I mean, makes no sense because one is a rotation and the other one is just a scalar multiplication, right? So that implies what? What does that imply? guys, if the field is just a set of real numbers, what will this imply?
No non-null eigenvectors.
Eigenvalues. There's no eigenvalues. No eigenvalues exist, right? I mean, you cannot have eigenvalues over the set of real numbers, right? So if f is equal to r, no eigenvalues. Okay, and you can easily, so instead of computing, this is the type of insight that I want you guys to develop. I mean, you really don't have to equate this and solve for lambda and find out that the lambdas are actually not real, right? I mean, we can do that for and I'll do it just for the heck of it, just to clarify any confusion that is there. Is that this lambda omega is minus z and lambda z is omega, right? Okay, and so we multiply this equation by lambda on both sides, right? So you get lambda square omega equal to minus lambda z, and you know that minus lambda z is nothing but, I mean, lambda z is nothing but omega, so this is minus omega, and then we have lambda square plus 1 omega equal to 0. Now this is non-trivial, right? So that means your lambda square plus 1 has to be equal to 0, and this has no solutions over the set of real numbers. Okay, all right. So no solutions over. But I mean, I really do not have to calculate this to figure that out. I can easily figure it out in the following manner, right? I mean, if you understand the geometry of the eigenvalues. However, right, if f equal to c, right, okay, then the story will change, correct? Right? Then the story will change. I mean, if f is equal to c, then of course there exist eigenvalues, and the eigenvalues are what? Plus I and minus I, correct? Okay, and accordingly, what would be your eigenvectors? Your eigenvectors are of the representation w and v, right? So you will have one eigenvector as w comma wi, and the other eigenvector as w comma w minus I. These will be your eigenvectors. Okay, all right. Okay. So now, so the question is, so this is an interesting example, because over the set of real numbers and complex numbers, it's you will have a different story, right? So now, what I want to do is to sort of come back to one of the very important results that I have proved otherwise also in an earlier discussion when I was giving you a general introduction to eigenvalues and eigenvectors. But there, the approach that we took was sort of an indirect approach. Okay, so what is that I want to prove now? I want to prove this theorem that let I have an operator, right? Okay, and then I suppose that lambda 1 through lambda n are distinct eigenvalues, distinct eigenvalues of t. Okay, and v1 through vm are the corresponding non-trivial eigenvectors. Okay, then we proved this earlier, right? But do you guys recall, anyone recall how did I prove this? Does anybody recall how did I prove this? Nobody recalls how did I prove this? Roshishno, do you recall how did I prove this? Hmm? You don't? Okay. As far as I recall, I first showed, using inner products, another tool in linear algebra, we showed that the set of, if the eigenvalues are real and distinct, then the corresponding eigenvectors are orthogonal, right? And then there was another proposition that we proved that a set of orthogonal eigenvectors are linearly independent. So it was like a sort of an indirect proof. I did not, give you a direct proof, right? Now with the advanced, concepts that we are familiar with, let's try a more direct route. Okay. So what I do is, I'll just take a contradictory approach, the method by contradiction, right? So method by contradiction. Which perhaps you are familiar with, from your discrete structure class, right? Which means what? I have to show that this is linearly independent, right? So I will assume that they are not. Okay. So let's assume that are linearly dependent. Okay. All right. Then, if that is the case, then I can just fix k a smallest positive integer, fix k a smallest positive integer, right? Such that, one of these vectors, right, would be in the span of, what? The rest of the other vectors, right? Correct? Okay. Now this simply follows from the property of linear dependence, because if you are not able to show a set of vectors is linearly independent, which means that from that set I can take any vector and that vector can be represented as a linear combination of the other vectors, which implies that that vector falls in the span of the other vectors, right? Okay. So now what I can do is, and therefore what happens is, this is equivalent to what? This is equivalent to saying that your V of k is a linear combination of all of these other guys. So A1, B1. Okay. All right. All right. Now I will do this. What I will do is, so let's call this star. Okay. What I'll do is, I'll do two things. I will multiply this star by lambda k, multiply this star by lambda k. If I do that, I will have this lambda k vk equal to a1 lambda k v1 okay. Let's call this 1. Okay. All right. Let's call this 1. Okay. What else can I do, guys, on this star? Any idea? Any trick or technique that you have studied before, learned in the class that you can apply? I want to go back to star and work on it again. Anything comes to mind? No? Okay. Nothing. Can you not use the fact that you are dealing with a linear transformation, because an operator is a linear transformation, right? Can you not use that property somehow onto star? So if I apply linear transformation to star, what do I get? I'll have t applied to this on both sides, right? So on the left hand side, what I will have is that I have tvk, right? Now what is tvk? According to the eigenvalue eigenvector equation, this tvk is nothing but lambda kvk, isn't it? Right? Now, what about the right hand side? What are you getting on the right hand side? On the right hand side, you have t applied onto this whole thing. But since t is a linear transformation, what you have is that you can write this as a1 tv1 blah 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 ak minus 1 t of vk minus 1, right? And in other words, what you can individually what you can write is that this tv1 will be what? Lambda 1 v1, correct? And then this tvk minus 1 would be what? Lambda k minus 1 v k minus 1. Let's call this equation number 2. Okay, all right. Now, I mean, I'm going to save this, but the trouble is if I move to a new whiteboard, I'll have to copy this again. Okay, let's do that. First, let's save this. Okay. Now let's just try to edit this. Forget it. I'm just messing this up. So it's better that I clear it and rewrite the equation 1. So I'm just copying equations 1 and 2. So copying equations 1 and 2. I think what did we do in the first equation? We multiplied this by lambda k, right? So so we had this lambda k vk equal to lambda k a1 v1 blah 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 lambda k ak minus 1 vk minus 1. That was equation 1, right? And the equation 2 was applying the linear transformation, right? So there what we did was we had lambda k vk again, and then we had a1 lambda 1 v1 plus ak minus 1 lambda k minus 1 vk minus 1. Yes, makes sense. Okay, so now that we have two equations, what we can do is that we subtract one from the other. Okay, so if I do that, on the left hand side I have 0. On the right hand side, what I have is lambda k minus lambda 1, right? a1 v1 plus lambda k minus lambda k minus 1 ak minus 1 vk minus 1, right? Now, since, remember, our choice of k, recall our choice of k. What was our choice of k? Our choice of k was that k is the smallest positive integer. K was the smallest positive integer, right? What does that mean? That if that is the case, such that the v1 to vk minus 1 has to be linearly independent, right? Because we sort of designed it in such a way that we chose k to be a smallest positive integer such that vk is in the span of vk to vk minus 1, right? So that definitely implies that this set is linearly independent, right? So therefore, that implies that all of these a1 through ak minus 1 have to be 0, right? So that means that all of this a1 to ak minus 1 has to be equal to 0 because they are the coefficients of these vectors, right? Okay. Now we also know, so, and also we know that none of this is equal to 0, right? Because, I mean, your lambdas are distinct, correct? Okay. So that means what? Did we reach a contradiction? But remember, I mean, if all of these guys are 0, right? What was our initial supposition? Our initial supposition was, this is what we assumed, right? I mean, we set this up. We assumed that Vk is what? Vk is A1 V1 plus A2 V2. I mean, k is such smallest positive integer that Vk is written like this, right? Now, if I interject this supposition with what we have just found out, is that this will imply what? Since these guys are all zeros, right? These guys are all zeros, then Vk is 0 identically. But what was our assumption about all the vectors that we are, I mean, our assumption about all the vectors is that these are non-trivial vectors because we are not interested in trivial vectors, right? So that means that these are non-trivial vectors. So that means what? Vk cannot be 0. Okay, all right. And so therefore we reached a contradiction. And so therefore our initial assumption that v1 through vn are linearly dependent is false, right? And therefore this has to be linearly independent. Okay. A corollary to this result is something straightforward, and I'm just going to state this for you, that each operator on V, each linear operator, of course, has at most dimension V distinct eigenvalues. I mean, it is just equivalent to saying that dimension of V is because V is null space P minus lambda 1 I direct sum this. Okay, all right. Okay. Okay. Now next is the we will now try to, what I'm going to do is we'll now try to map these eigenvalues of linear operators with some special structures of matrices. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we're trying to see that this T is an operator and some special matrices. By special matrices, I mean it could be an upper triangular matrix or a diagonal matrix, right? Upper triangular or diagonal. Okay, all right. Now here, in order to see these relationships, we need to recall like elementary results on polynomials. In the last class, if you recall, that we did say that if there is a polynomial, right, and that polynomial has some roots, then you should be able to decompose the polynomial. You should be able to write that polynomial as a product of linear factors, right? So that is something we could actually use, right? So one result that is sort of once again important, and I'm not going to prove this today, right? I'll just state this for you, that every operator on a finite dimensional vector space, right? And I'll just assume it. Every operator on a finite dimensional vector space, right? And complex as well, right? So every operator on V is dimension of V is finite and V is just complex. Every operator on a complex finite dimensional vector space, right, has an eigenvalue. This is not necessarily true when your V is a real vector space, okay? Because we have already seen examples where operators defined on real vector spaces do not have eigenvalues, right? Okay, all right. But every operator on a complex vector space must have an eigenvalue. This is a very, very important result, right? But I'm not going to prove this today, okay? But rather what I want to direct your attention to is that if you know that, what do we know is that we will prove later. We will prove this later, right? We'll prove later. Is that if, why does this sound relevant? Because you know that matrices are induced by linear transformations, right? So if there is an operator and defined on one-dimensional vector spaces, right, and you can write your vector space as a direct sum of all of these null spaces, then of course, such operators could be represented as a as a matrix, right? Okay, so precisely, you just recall that we have done this, that suppose I have a linear operator and suppose that I have a basis, right, of V, right, and then I could represent, like, I think this should come back to you. Makes sense, right? And what is K? K is just 1 through n, right? So what you will get is for different values of K, like when K is equal to 1, you will have TV1 equal to A11 B1 plus blah, 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 all the way up to A1 KVN, right? So you are going to get, the first row, correct? And then when k is equal to 2, you are going to get the second row. And when k equal to 3, you are going to get the third row, right? So the matrix induced by the linear transformation will be nothing but A11, right? We just read it off, right? Blah blah blah, A1n, right? And similarly along the column, it is AN1, right? And this is ANN, right? So this is the matrix induced by okay, with respect to the basis V1 through Vn, right? And you can call this matrix any way you want, right? Okay. So we typically, the representation is we just call this the matrix induced by the linear transformation, right? Okay. Now, if I do not give you a basis, you can just assume a standard basis, which is 1, 0, 0, 0, blah, 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 right? So what is the goal? The central goal is that I want to show that given an operator, if I give you an operator, right, there exists a basis of V with respect to which T has a reasonably simple matrix. And this reasonably simple matrix sometimes gives rise to an upper triangular matrix, sometimes it gives rise to a diagonal matrix, right? Okay, sometimes it could also give you a lower triangular matrix, right? Okay. So this statement might sound vague for you right now, right? But remember, if a vector, if an operator is defined on a finite dimensional vector space which is complex, you know that that operator has an eigenvalue, right? And so that means with respect to the basis of the vector space, right? You could have, zeros everywhere except the first column, right? I mean, okay, or some basis which could look like, I could have a basis which looks like this, right? I could have a basis which looks like, right? Okay, right? I could, right? Okay, so does this make sense? So just to so that we are clear, let lambda be an eigenvalue of T. Okay, so let lambda be an eigenvalue of T, and let V be a corresponding non-zero eigenvector. So you can expand this V onto a basis of the vector space, right? Remember, if you have a basis of corresponding to one eigenvalue, if you have a basis on a finite dimensional vector space, you can extend that basis to its superspace, right? We have seen this. This is called an extension of basis, right? From a lower dimensional vector space to a higher dimensional vector space, right? So similarly, I can have a diagonal of a square matrix that will consist of entries along the straight line, right? From the upper left corner to the bottom right corner. Okay. In such case, also you should be able to define a basis. Okay. All right. So all of this can be a basis. You can have the first column as a basis, you can have the second column as the basis, and so on and so forth, right? Okay. In the case of a diagonal matrix, let's say I have something like this, D1, D2, all the way up to Dn, right? And see, everything else is zero here, right? Everything else is zero here, right? So what you get is that this D1 blah blah blah. This is one basis vector. This is another basis vector, and this is also another basis vector. So similarly, you have a bunch of basis vectors, right? Okay. Then you can form this sort of a matrix or the corresponding linear transformation. Okay. So the conjecture is the following, and it's very, very simple, right? But important enough for us to know that for operator, okay, on a finite dimensional vector space, and under the assumptions that it has a basis, so under the assumptions, right, then the following are equivalent. And what are these following? That the M of T, the matrix of T with respect to the basis vector, okay, is upper triangular. This is one statement. Okay. The second statement is okay for every k from 1 to n, right? That also should make sense, right? So what is TVK? TVK is the range, right? So the range of that, you apply this transformation on any vector. So you can consider V1, and these are all taken from your basis set. So the range of it is going to where? The range is also going to the vector space V, right? And so therefore it must be in the span of these basis vectors, right? And 3 is that the span of the vectors V1 through Vk is invariant under T for each of k. For each k. Okay, so these three statements are actually equivalent. Okay, so you could always find a basis with an upper triangular, as an upper triangular matrix. You can always form a matrix which is upper triangular corresponding to this kind of invariant subspaces, right? At least an upper triangular matrix. And if the conditions are nicer, then you can actually get a diagonal matrix as well. Okay, all right. Okay, so similarly, I will just state another proposition. And once again, I'm not going to prove this today, but I would like to hear from you that suppose, let me write it here, that say I have a linear operator which has an upper triangular matrix with respect to some basis of V. So this has an upper triangular matrix with respect to some basis of V, right? Then I want to see under what conditions is this guy invertible. Can you tell me? Shall I repeat my question? My question is, P is a linear operator, right? Defined on a finite dimensional vector space with respect to some basis, right? Now what I am, and of course, it therefore induces a matrix, right? Okay. Now what I want to know is that under what conditions will this operator be invertible? Any idea? So what does this operator relate to? From the statements that you have just seen, this operator will relate to at least an upper triangular matrix, right? So in order that the T is invertible, T has to be 1 to 1 and on 2, right? If T is 1 to 1, if T has to be 1 to 1 and on 2, then each one of your, basis vectors, which are nothing but the columns of your upper triangular matrix, right? They also have to be sort of non-trivial, right? So what does that imply? In an upper triangular matrix, except the principal diagonal elements, the other elements are anyway, non-trivial. So the sufficient condition for this to hold is that the elements along the principal diagonal, okay, of the upper triangular matrix have to be non-zero, right? So therefore, for such a linear operator to be invertible, all the diagonal elements of an upper triangular matrix has to be non-zero. The same applies to a diagonal matrix as well. Okay, all right. And if that is true, then there is something else that we can say. We can say that suppose T is a linear transformation, it's an operator, and T has an upper triangular matrix with respect to some basis in the vector space V, then the eigenvalues of T consist of precisely the entries of the diagonal. And we do not need to figure this out by computing the determinant of that matrix. It's absolutely not required. Okay, so that is the insight that we gain from invariant subspaces. Okay, because each one of those invariant subspaces, remember, is a T minus lambda 1, right? The null of T minus lambda 1, right? And that cannot be 0, and because lambda 1 has to be the root of the characteristic polynomial. Okay, all right. So I think with this, I mean, I'll have to solve a few more examples, right? And but I would conclude today's lecture now, and I will just give you one example to think of. Yeah, like this. So, now the thing is, I mean, every linear operator may or may not have a diagonal matrix, right? I mean, that is too optimistic to understand, to sort of you know, expect, right? So let's just to see that if I define an operator like this, okay, all right. Now, will this, my question is this, will this give rise to a sort of a diagonal matrix? That is my question. And if not, then why? Just think about this. So I'll repeat my question. This is my linear operator, right? Okay. Will this give rise to a m of t which is diagonal? Okay. In fact, and then there are some other interesting results, and that actually leads to a lot of nice applications, some of which we have already seen in the singular value decomposition, is that under what conditions can you actually decompose a matrix? Okay, all right. So guys, what do you think? Can you construct a matrix induced by this operator which is diagonal? Yes or no? I mean, in order to do that, you need to have some basis, right? Do we have a basis? And that basis is what? I mean, that basis has to be a basis of eigenvectors, right? No? No idea? Nothing? Okay, tell me, what is the eigenvalue of this operator? No? Hello? What is the eigenvalue of this operator? No? So 0 is the only eigenvalue, right? So if 0 is the only eigenvalue, what kind of basis vectors do you expect? I mean, these are your eigenvectors, right? As you can clearly see. So you actually do not have enough linearly independent eigenvectors to form a basis, right? And so therefore, I mean, it does not have a diagonal matrix with respect to any basis in the real or complex vector. Okay, all right, and therefore the answer to this is no. Okay. Okay. All right. See you next time.